Hi guys, today we're going to take a look at functions and returning values with our functions here. So we're going to take the next step. We've already covered functions and parameters, so now let's talk about return values. So go ahead and create a new playground, and I called mine returns. You can label it, something along the same lines there. And let's take a look here at just kind of the next step here before we get into our first challenge. So if you recall here, so function with no return value. I'm going to head this. So far we've created functions. So I'm just going to create a function called color of sky. All right, it's a real basic function here, no parameters, no return value. So hopefully this looks familiar. So again, we've got our function, but we're not returning anything. So if I were to type in var sky color is equal to blue, so I've given a property inside my function here, but at this point we're not returning anything. So if I were to call this function here, so again I'm going to label this function call nothing is returned. Okay, so if I go sky color, let that load up there. Oops, sorry, color of sky, there's the name of my function, my mistake there. So when I call that, again, you'll notice that blue shows up inside the function, right, but nothing's getting returned here. Okay, so everything kind of just is residing inside the function there. So we need to, if we want to get something out of the function, that's when a return value comes into play here. Okay, so let's go through that. How do you set up a return value? How does it look? And then we'll compare what a function with no return value, what it looks like when you call it, to when you do have a return value. So let's label our next section here, function with, function with a return value. All right, so let's go ahead and create function. All right, so func color of, we'll call this color of sky return, since we're going to do the return value. We won't do any parameters right now, but the big difference right now is if you want to do a return value, the symbol is right here. It's just an arrow. All right, and that's nothing more than the minus side on your keyboard, and then the caret facing to the right. And then now we got to specify what do we want to return. So you can return strings, ints, doubles, floats. So you need to determine that. Okay, so for this one we're going to return a string. We want to return the color of the sky, which is blue. So we're going to return a string. All right, so that'd be the first part. So again, function keyword, the name of our function, parentheses for parameters, the return symbols, and then we type in the type of return. From there we just add our curly braces, and now we just need to code here to determine what do we want to have happen in here. Okay, so what are we looking to create? So if we did the same thing from above here, we could go var sky color is equal to blue. All right, so now to return, actually notice we're getting an error message. So this error message is basically saying, if you click on it, that we're missing return in a function expected to return a string. So again, we've said, hey, we're going to return a string with this code right here. So we need to return something. All right, Xcode Swift is looking for it. We need to give them that return value. So all we need to do is type in the word return. All right, and then what do we want to return? Okay, so we said we're returning a string. Okay, and our sky color blue is a string. So all we need to return here in this case is the variable sky color. All right, and now since sky color has been assigned to a string, that's going to work. Okay, so now we're returning this. So now let's do a function call with a return value. So if I go color of sky return, you'll notice that it now is returning the color blue. Okay, so again, if you look at the difference here, no return value, nothing's coming out of the function. Here, I'm getting the value of blue. Okay, so it's returning that value to me there. So that's a function with a return value. Okay, so now let's go a step further here. Let's do a function that accepts a parameter and returns a value. Okay, so let's do this. So we'll go function, and it's payday today. So let's go function my bank account. And we'll set it. We'll just do a little math with a checking account here. So let's do a name parameter payday. We'll make that a double. Let's do a name parameter bank account. We'll make that a double as well. And then, so now same thing, we want to return a value, so we're going to do our return symbol. Let's return a double. Okay, so again, we've created a function bank account that's going to accept two parameters, payday and bank account, so the user will type that in. And then this function is going to return a double, basically telling the individual what their new bank account is at this point here. So again, we want to go ahead and just do the return, so return. All right, because that's what it's looking for. All right, and now we're just going to use the parameters that we passed. So we're going to take payday and bank account. All right, so the user is going to enter those in here. We want to add those two numbers up. So we're going to go payday plus bank account. Okay, and that's going to give us, whatever number is based on what the user is going to use. And again, payday and bank account are coming from right here. So these are the parameters we're passing. We're going to use those parameters in our return because they're doubles. It works because we're returning a double. All right, so now if I call my bank account, okay, so again, it's a name parameter, so that's why I have the parameters showing up. All right, so let's say I get $100 on payday. My bank account was $200 previous to that. All right, so again, it's returning a $300. So again, simple math, 200 plus 100. But again, this function's returning a value. Okay, so that's a function that accepts a parameter and returns a value. All right. Let's go up to it and let's talk about something a little different here. We're going to talk about a function that returns two values, also known as a tuple, tuple, however you want to pronounce that. Okay, so let's talk about a function that returns two values, and that, again, I'm going to put that in all caps, is referred to as a tuple. I guess I will pronounce that. So let's see here. So let's do like a game here. So we're going to go func. Player scores, all right, will be the name of our function here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to pass two parameters. So we're going to go player 1 score, and we'll make that an int, and then we'll go player 2 score, also going to be an int. Oh, all right, so now with a tuple here, we're going to return two values. So we want this function to come out and show us what player 1's total is and player 2 total is after the game is played here. So, that's the idea, kind of a leaderboard, I guess, here. So to return two values, we're just going to put the values we want to return. So we're going to return two ints. All right, so we just put those inside parentheses. I got to work on typing here this morning. And let's close that off with parentheses. So same thing, we're going to return. So we got our symbol. And now we're just going to have two return types separated by a comma. Okay, so now inside our function, here's where we got to decide what do we want this function to do. Okay, so the goal is we want to take the player 1 score that gets entered in here, and we want to take that, add that to their baseline score, so 0. So kind of as the game goes on, we're just going to add to that score. So let's create a couple variables, for our player 1 score total. All right, and that's going to go ahead. We're going to equal 0. All right, got to work on my typing here. Sorry about that. 0 plus, and again, we're going to take the parameter that's being passed, player 1 score. All right, so again, that's coming from right here. Okay, so again, we're looking to, again, take the number they pass in, add it to 0, and we'll do the same thing for player 2 score total. We'll take 0, and then we're going to add the number that gets entered in with the player 2 score parameter. Okay, so now we got to get rid of our nasty error here, and we got to return a value. All right, so again, we want to return two values. So in our return statement here, we got to have two values entered in here, or else you'll get a mistake. You can't just return one value because we said, hey, we want two values to come out here. So the two values we want to return, all right, are right here. We're going to return player 1 score and player 2. And again, we want to return them as ints, and that'll set up that way because they are variables being assigned to ints here. So I can type in player 1 score total and player 2 score total. Oop. Okay, so go ahead and close that off. So now we've completed a function with two return types. So let's go ahead and call this variable. So player scores. All right, so let's say player 1 scored 20, player 2 scored 30. All right, so you'll notice it returns two values, 20 and 30. So that's just the math is simple on that. 0 plus 20, 0 plus 30. But again, I could go in and change that to 10 for each there, and it adjusts accordingly. Again, the advantage of functions, I don't have to go through and change code over and over. I just go to the function, make the change in there, and then wherever the function is called, the change is made there. Okay, so now with a tuple, just to show you kind of how it's arranged here, because you might be wondering about what's this 0.0 and what is this 0.1. Basically, that's the index or the location of those scores. So we always start at 0. So 0 is the first number in this index, which is 30, and then 1 is the second one, which is 40. Okay, so again, just so we're clear, so we pass player 1 score of 20. All right, it goes right up here. All right, so then that's player 1 score. 20 plus 10 is 30. Player 1 score total is 30. All right, we're returning player 1 score total. That's where the 30 is coming from. All right, so just to kind of maybe make this a little more clear, let's make a concept called game scores. All right, now let's call the function here. Let's do 40 and 50. Okay, so now what we can do, if I were to call game scores and type game scores 0.0, okay, you'll notice that over here, that's equal to 50. So again, it's game scores, and then it's looking for the first number or the first item in our index, which is 0. Again, 50. Same thing here. If I go game score is 0.1, it's going to access the second number in our, that's returned from the function here, which is in our case 60. Okay, so that's what the 0.0 and 0.1 are. So that's a look at return values and functions. All right, so again, as you can see, we've kind of built from functions with no return values all the way down to functions with 2 return values. Call that a tuple or a tuple, kind of like tomato, tomato. That's going to be up to you how you want to pronounce it. But either way, these are good examples to use here as we're working on our challenge here a little later today in class. But as always, if you have questions, make sure you're asking here. But thanks for following along here, and we'll see you guys next time.